At a desk or in an airport, busy with life. They're the names of people who faced death and in their last moments called home to say, "Be brave, and I love you." They're the names of passengers who defied their murderers and prevented the murder of others on the ground. They're the names of men and women who wore the uniform of the United States and died at their posts. They are the names of rescuers, the ones whom death found running up the stairs and into the fires to help others. We will read all these names. We will linger over them and learn their stories, and many Americans will weep. To the children and parents and spouses and families and friends of the lost, we offer the deepest sympathy of the nation. And I assure you, you are not alone. Just 3 days removed from these events, Americans do not yet have the distance of history, but our responsibility to history is already clear: to answer these attacks and rid the world of evil. War has been waged against us by stealth and deceit and murder. This nation is peaceful, but fierce when stirred to anger. This conflict was begun on the timing and terms of others. It will end in a way and at an hour of our choosing. Our purpose as a nation is firm, yet our wounds as a people are recent and unhealed and lead us to pray. In many of our prayers this week, there's a searching and an honesty. At St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York on Tuesday, a woman said, "I prayed to God to give us a sign that He's still here." Others have prayed for the same, searching hospital to hospital, carrying pictures of those still missing. God's signs are not always the ones we look for. We learn in tragedy that His purposes are not always our own. Yet the prayers of private suffering, whether in our homes or in this great cathedral, are known and heard and understood. There are prayers that help us last through the day or endure the night. There are prayers of friends and strangers that give us strength for the journey. And there are prayers that yield our will to a will greater than our own. This world He created is of moral design. Grief and tragedy and hatred are only for a time. Goodness, remembrance, and love have no end. And the Lord of life holds all who die and all who mourn. It is said that adversity introduces us to ourselves. This is true of a nation as well. In this trial, we have been reminded, and the world has seen, that our fellow Americans are generous and kind, resourceful and brave. We see our national character in rescuers working past exhaustion, in long lines of blood donors, in thousands of citizens who have asked to work and serve in any way possible. And we have seen our national character in eloquent acts of sacrifice. Inside the World Trade Center, one man who could have saved himself stayed until the end at the side of his quadriplegic friend. A beloved priest died giving the last rites to a firefighter. 2 office workers finding a disabled stranger carried her down 68 floors to safety. A group of men drove through the night from Dallas to Washington to bring skin grafts for burn victims. In these acts and many others, Americans showed a deep commitment to one another and an abiding love for our country. Today we feel what Franklin Roosevelt called the warm courage of national unity. This is a unity of every faith and every background. It has joined together political parties in both houses of Congress. It is evident in services of prayer and candlelight vigils and American flags, which are displayed in pride and wave in defiance. Our unity is a kinship of grief and a steadfast resolve to prevail against our enemies. And this unity against terror is now extending across the world. America is a nation full of good fortune, with so much to be grateful for. But we are not spared from suffering. In every generation, the world has produced enemies of human freedom. They have attacked America because we are freedom's home and defender. And the commitment of our fathers is now the calling of our time. On this National Day of Prayer and Remembrance, we ask Almighty God to watch over our nation and grant us patience and resolve in all that is to come. We pray that He will comfort and console those who now walk in sorrow. We thank Him for each life we now must mourn and the promise of a life to come. As we've been assured, neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth can separate us from God's love. May He bless the souls of the departed. May He comfort our own. And may He always guide our country. God bless America.
Let us pray. O God, whose days are without end and whose mercies cannot be numbered, grant to us and to all who are bereaved the spirit of faith and courage, that we may have strength to meet the days to come with steadfastness and patience, not sorrowing as those without hope, but in thankful remembrance of your great goodness, and in the joyful expectation of eternal life with those we love. These things we ask in your most holy name. Amen.
Go forth now into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Hold fast to that which is good. Render to no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the afflicted. Honor everyone. Love and serve the Lord. And now the peace of God Almighty be with you this day and forevermore. The God who created you, the God who liberates you, and the God who stays with you for this day and for eternity. Amen. Amen.
national prayer service at the cathedral, National Cathedral here in Washington, has just concluded. As we listened to the sound of tolling bells, we heard the Reverend Billy Graham say, this is a tragedy that could have torn this country apart. Instead, it has united us. He said if the terrorists wanted to tear this nation apart, it's worked the other way. He also talked about underneath the World Trade Center, which crumbled after the 2 airplanes crashed into the Twin Towers. He said underneath the debris is a foundation that is not destroyed. He said we too have a choice, whether to implode and disintegrate or to become stronger. President Bush, speaking toward the end of this service, we are in the middle hour of our grief, he said. He talked of offering deepest sympathies to the children, the families of those who are missing, who are dead. He spoke words of comfort, but he also spoke words of firm resolve. He said, this is a war that was started by others at a time unknown to us. It will end at an hour of our choosing. CNN's White House correspondent John King is listening and watching at the White House.
More than 100 people, when I counted 30 minutes ago, were lined up.
And I'm here now at the cathedral with the Reverend Franklin Graham. You were just saying to me, Reverend Graham,
these people showed up anyway,
that the American people really don't have a sense right now of what we are facing as a nation.
I don't think so. I think many people think that maybe this is closure.
Thank God.
But in some ways, this is the beginning of a long struggle for our way of life. And I believe there is a war that is in front of us. And my father spoke of the hope. And we as a nation, we need that hope. And we talked of the hope as Christians that we have in faith in Jesus Christ, God's Son. And he spoke of that foundation which you mentioned, and the foundation that we have as a nation, which is there. And even though we have been attacked, our foundation needs to be on Almighty God. And we as a nation, we need to turn back to God and build on that foundation which was started by our forefathers many years ago. And of course, the President talked about ridding the world of evil. And one day I believe that will happen when God comes and when Jesus Christ, the Son of Almighty God, establishes his kingdom here on earth. We'll see evil removed. But till then, evil's going to be present with us, and it needs to be fought, and we need to oppose it, and we need to work for good in this world while we have an opportunity.
Your father spoke with remarkable energy. You were telling me he's 83 years old. He walks with a cane sometimes now. He walked slowly, but his words were vigorous, and they were strong. It struck me, Reverend Graham, he said at one point, we come together to affirm our conviction that God cares for us, whatever our ethnic, political, or religious background. He was speaking to everyone.
He was, and God does care for all of us, and he loves all of us. And that's what my father wanted to get across to the nation, that God is a God of love, and he's a caring God.
I mention that because this is a time when many of us might be tempted to look at those of Arab backgrounds from the Middle Eastern part of the world and just in a blanket sense turn against those people.
And we shouldn't do that. I have many Arab friends, many Muslim friends, wonderful people who, of course, are just as brokenhearted and disgusted over the incidents of this past week as we are. And we should not just turn our hatred toward people of another race or of another religion. We need to focus on those that are actually responsible for this. And it wasn't a race of people that did this. It was a small group of people who have been on the destruction of this country, these Islamic fundamentalists that need to be stopped. So I just plead with people not to paint in a broad brush, so to speak, the people of the Middle East. They're wonderful people.
Do you have any doubt, Reverend Graham, that we are headed for a war?
Yes, I believe so. I really do. And how long it will be, I don't know. But you're not going to be able to attack these terrorists and defeat them in 100 days. It's not going to be a Gulf War. This is going to take time.
You know, it's been said ever since Vietnam, and perhaps even before that, Americans have been reluctant to think of sending our young people off to the far corners of the earth to die for causes that Americans didn't necessarily understand or support. But I hear you saying this is different.
This is different. This is for the sake and security of this nation. And this may sound rough, Judy, but we need to use every weapon in our arsenal if need be to defeat this enemy. And I don't think we should hold back, and we'll make a great mistake if we hold back our technology and hold back our weapons and put young men and women in there and sacrifice them because we're scared to use some of our major weapons. And I think we're going to have to use every, and I hate to say it, hellish weapon in our inventory if need be to defeat these people.
Do you really believe that the American people are prepared now to have young Americans die?
No, but I think they're prepared to stop this, but not to put our young men needlessly, or our young women needlessly. And yes, there may be some young men and women whose lives may be lost, and I pray not. And that's why I think we need to use these weapons that we have, and not our young men and not our young women, and just sacrifice them as cannon fodder. But let's use the weapons we have, the weapons of mass destruction if need be, and destroy the enemy.
We're watching the front of the National Cathedral here in Washington. Just prayer service called just yesterday by President Bush just concluded. We're seeing an extraordinary coming together of presidents, former President Clinton, former President Gore, whom, as I mentioned earlier, President Bush specifically asked to come to this service. Many of the people in the cathedral, members of Congress, members of the Bush administration, but also families suffering. We saw people clearly emotionally moved, having a hard time holding back their emotions. And we can only assume they are families of those who missing and dead at the Pentagon and perhaps in New York City.
And I think the president's message is probably one of the greatest speeches I have heard in recent times. Especially, I think it's the greatest message he's ever given speech. And I think he touched the heart of America with his words. He reminded us of the stories and of the heroes, the real heroes, the people who have sacrificed their lives already to save others, the firemen, the priests, the men and women in uniform that died on their post. And I think this may be one of the great hours in our nation right now as we prepare to go forward to deal with this.
We're watching former President Clinton speak with the head of the Democratic Party, Terry McAuliffe. This is one of those moments when political parties, the differences between the two parties seem to fall away. Aaron Brown joining us now in New York. Aaron, it seemed to me that the president wanted to make a point of the character of Americans, and we're watching President Clinton, as we all are, affected emotionally by this. But President Bush said, "It is said that adversity introduces us to ourselves." He said that's true of a nation as well.
He said, he quoted a Franklin Delano Roosevelt line. He talked about the warm courage of national unity that we are basking in this difficult moment. I was struck, Judy, by the beauty of the cathedral, of the words, the music, in contrast to the utterly obscene look of the Pentagon and the World Trade Center. That contrast seems so powerful to us as we sit here in New York today.
It is, Aaron. And the sounds here in Washington, too. I mean, we've listened over the last few days to the replaying of the screams of those as they watched the aftermath of those planes hitting the World Trade Center, the screams of those who couldn't believe what they were seeing. And today we hear voices lifted in song and in praise. And you're right, it is, the contrast could not be more stark.
And we also, as the service was beginning, we were quite moved by the services that were going on in other places, from quite literally Maine to California, all across the country, as Americans of all faiths gathered on this Friday, this memorable week, unforgettable week, gathered together and worshiped and cried and hoped for better days. One never knows how long these moments of national connection last. But while they are occurring, while they happen, and they almost always occur in the country's most difficult moments, they are quite moving. Former Senator, presidential candidate Bob Dole there.
Aaron, I really believe, and you know, I guess it's being said over and over, this country hasn't seen anything like this since World War II. We haven't had an occasion to come together with this sort of political and religious unity, ethnic unity, you know, all those words that Billy Graham spoke. Whatever our backgrounds, we join together as a country. And you think back to the challenges this nation has faced in the last half century, and I can't think of a time when the country has seemed more united than it seems right now, and will need to be as we face whatever lies ahead.
It certainly speaks to how strongly the events of Tuesday shook the nation, that those buildings could come down, that the Pentagon could be hit, that so many lives could be lost, that a vulnerability could be exposed, is so utterly shocking, I think, to Americans, that it made it important to join hands. And for however long it lasts, whether it's days or weeks or months, who knows, certainly there will be days and issues coming up where political differences will emerge again, as they always do. But one wonders, can't know, but wonders, if something profound here has happened.
John King at the White House. John, a lot of care went into preparing the remarks that we heard from President Bush today.
That's right, Judy. The White House realizing the president here faces a number of challenges. On the one hand, it is his job to try to console the nation, certainly to rally the courage of the American people, if you will. Senior advisors here saying that in the days, months, and years ahead, this administration will be committed to a war against terrorism, emphasis on years ahead. And we're told there could be some military response, perhaps even in the days ahead, if the president is satisfied that the investigation has come to a certifiable conclusion about the responsible party or parties. But also a senior official last night telling us
he would not be walking in an area, though, where they have an active search for a survivor going on.
But Judy, as a practical matter, the damage is so broad and so widespread that wherever, assuming the president is within even a couple of blocks, and surely he is, it's a terrible scene down there, and it is not unlikely there are victims of the collapse still there. Just picking up on something that Marty just said, there's a tunnel that the PATH trains are the commuter trains that run between New Jersey and what was the trade center. That was the end point, or the beginning point, I guess, depending which way you're going. And crews from the other side, from the New Jersey side, with the Jersey City Fire Department, continue to work through the tunnel. They are hopeful, as Marty indicated, that's a natural air pocket, and that perhaps if they work quickly enough, and it's flooded now, but if they can work quickly enough, pumping out, clearing away, working their way through it, there is a possibility, just a possibility, but a possibility they may find someone alive, Judy.
Aaron, we've also learned, we've been talking about the many roles that a president fills at a time like this. He's keeping an eye, of course, on the investigation. He's looking to the military front, to what our options are as a nation. He's touring, he's been comforting families of those who are missing and presumed dead. We also have been told today that he has proclaimed that flags throughout the country will remain at half staff through not just tomorrow, which I think had been the original plan, but through Saturday, September the 22nd, which extends this period of national observance, if not mourning, at least for one more week. And I will also tell you, I see that CNN correspondent Jean Meserve has reported in talking to Walmart and other stores that sell flags, that the sales of American flags have shot way up. Walmart reporting it sold 314,000 American flags just on Tuesday and Wednesday this week. In the previous 2 days, it had only sold 15,000. Kmart sold 200,000 flags. So the point we're making is that there is a burst of patriotism in this country.
Yeah, it's pretty clear when we've been, and we haven't had obviously much time to be out and about, but when we've been out, we have certainly seen in New York signs of that. We saw an American flag in a restaurant the other night. Some firefighters came in and they were applauded and serenaded with the national anthem or God Bless America. It is one of those moments too. The president is down touring in the area. This is tape of the president as he circled the area around the Trade Center. He's approaching the area of the Trade Center. This would be the pool footage that we're just now getting in, and this took place not all that long ago, like perhaps a half hour ago. We lose track of time a little bit these days. Coming into Manhattan, well, that looks to me like the southern tip of the island, so we're just kind of wheeling around, and I would guess there we go, as we zoom in, you see where it all once was. It's really, to my memory at least, the first time that I have seen the south tip of the island, of Manhattan Island, looking back at where the Trade Center was. All our focus has been from the other side, from the north looking down. Shot of the president's helicopter landing at a heliport along the Hudson. And that's a scene live that we have all become too familiar with over the last few days, Judy.
Well, Aaron, we're going to, of course, keep our cameras trained on that area of South Manhattan where President Bush and other dignitaries are getting their first look at the rescue recovery efforts there. But today in Washington at the Justice Department, they were giving out more information on the suspected hijackers. Attorney General John Ashcroft released the names of 19 men suspected of hijacking the 4 airliners that went down on Tuesday. Now, all 19 of those are presumed dead, of course. Law enforcement officials tell CNN all of the men can be linked to suspected terrorist leader Osama bin Laden. FBI Director Robert Mueller described the efforts his bureau has taken to investigate the attacks on Tuesday.
As of today, we have 4,000 FBI special agents who are working on the case in various offices around the country and on various aspects of the investigation, and we have 3,000 support employees also on the investigation. 20 FBI legal offices are running down leads overseas, and all 56 FBI offices around the country are engaged in the investigation.
It's FBI Director Robert Mueller, and now for the latest developments in the investigations underway, let's go to Mike Betcher at CNN Center in Atlanta. Mike.
Well, Judy, they're looking at those 19 names. As you said, they believe that they do have contact somehow with Osama bin Laden. What they're trying to find out is what groups did these people actually belong to? And I have information gleaned from intelligence sources about some of the groups they're looking at and some of the individuals. Let's begin with Islamic Jihad of Egypt, sometimes called Al-Jihad. It is led by a man named Ayman Zawahiri, and this is a picture of Zawahiri on the left with bin Laden. That was taken about a year ago. He is a top lieutenant of bin Laden. We have a fact sheet on this man. He goes either by Abu Fatma or Dr. Abdel Muiz. He's Egypt's most wanted man, widely regarded as military commander and chief strategist of the militant Islamic Jihad, or Al-Jihad. And he is the personal physician and close associate to Osama bin Laden. Now, we also have a second group and person that's being looked at by U.S. intelligence agencies, and frankly, this name puts chills down the spines of counter-terrorists who work in this country. He is being looked at, but has not been connected that I know of or have been told, but I am told that he's looked at as one of the people that could have a connection. His name is Imad Mughniyeh. Imad Mughniyeh is well known in terrorism circles. This is not Imad Mughniyeh, actually. This is, we'll take that off. In fact, only one picture in the last 21 years exists of Imad Mughniyeh. He was one of the original founding members of Lebanese Hezbollah, and up until this event that happened in New York and Washington, terrorism experts say he killed more Americans and prosecutors in this country than any other terrorist in the world. He is responsible, they say, for the U.S. embassy bombing in Beirut, the Marine barracks bombing, hostage taking, bombings in Argentina, bombings in Saudi Arabia, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, a link between bin Laden and Imad Mughniyeh came to light back in 1994 when intelligence sources were able to discover that at an Islamic conference in the Sudan, bin Laden and Mughniyeh came together to talk at this conference in the night, and that they believed some of the seeds could have been planted back then in 1994 for what is happening now. Not the specific plan, but a general strategy. That's at least a theory they're working on or looking at right now. Now, more evidence of the bin Laden-Mughniyeh connection came from this man you saw earlier, Ali Muhammad, who was a U.S. Special Forces sergeant. Ali Muhammad was recruited by the Al-Qaeda organization, and he testified at the trial of terrorists who were convicted of conducting the Africa embassy bombings. Let's look at that testimony. I'll read it to you. He says, "I was aware of certain contacts between Al-Qaeda and Al-Jihad organization on one side and Iran and Hezbollah on the other side. I arranged security for a meeting in the Sudan between Mughniyeh, Hezbollah's chief, and bin Laden. Hezbollah provided explosives training for Al-Qaeda and Al-Jihad. Iran supplied Egyptian Jihad with weapons. Iran also used Hezbollah to supply explosives that were disguised to look like rocks." Now, this came in public testimony, and it relates to terrorist activities up to the African embassy bombings, but that is a public link by a former member of Al-Qaeda between Mughniyeh and Osama bin Laden. So that's something very important to keep an eye on if that pans out as a lead. I will tell you that I spent some time in Beirut this summer, talked to leaders of Hezbollah, because Hezbollah's name was brought up in that testimony. Hezbollah denies they have any intentions ever to attack the United States with any terrorism. They're very emphatic about that, and I want to make that point clear. That's what they say. But these various links are being looked at in the intelligence community, and there are a lot of links to look at, Judy.
All right, Mike Boettcher in Atlanta watching all these investigative threads, and I would just, one question that immediately comes to my mind, but I'm not going to ask you this now, Mike, is how, if they're coming up with all this information now, after the fact, why weren't we knowing about it earlier? But we're going to be talking to someone in a moment who can perhaps help us answer that question. At the Pentagon, they're not only keeping an eye on the investigative aspects of this, they're of course also looking at what are the next steps militarily. And for both of those angles, let's turn to CNN's military affairs correspondent, Jamie McIntyre. Jamie?
Well, Judy, the Pentagon announced today, as we reported last night, that the Pentagon has requested and President Bush has authorized a call-up of thousands of reservists to back up some of the people who are flying combat air patrols over the United States and also providing disaster relief. Each service, the order is approved for 50,000 reservists to be called to active duty. Each of the services have reviewed what it is that they've been asked to do and identified requirements so far for about 35,000 reservists. The breakdown is about as follows. The Army is planning to call up about 10,000 people. The Air Force, 13,000. Many of those will be air crews and pilots for these planes that are flying, either flying over the United States, providing homeland defense, or on strip alert, waiting to be sent on a moment's notice to take to the air. The Marines will be calling up 75,000 people, the Navy 3,000, the Coast Guard 2,000. They're going to be providing everything from port operations to medical support to engineering support, support of civil authorities, even things like chaplains and military police will be called up. And initially what they're doing is they're asking asking for volunteers. You might ask, well, who are these reservists? And basically they're your co-workers, they're your neighbors. They're my cameraman today is in the military reserve. And the head of Reserve Affairs for the Pentagon said today that they're getting an enormous response from reservists who say they are volunteering for duty.
We've had people who are knocking on the doors seeking to help. They want to serve. They want to be a part of this. They're very emotional. We've had to say, wait a little bit. You know, we've only had a matter of hours since this all began. We're proceeding along our way, and now we have the authorization to bring those people on board.
Now, the way the U.S. military is structured today, it can't launch any major military operation without the help of reservists. That's part of the plan. But this mobilization is really geared more toward, as I said, homeland defense, making sure the United States is protected from any future threats, and support of civil authorities who are engaged in disaster relief. If the United States moves ahead with military action against suspected terrorists, that will probably necessitate another call-up of reserves. Judy?
All right, Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon. And Jamie, as you've been talking, we've been looking on the right side of our screen at the president's motorcade in lower Manhattan. These are live pictures of President Bush. We've been reporting to you about his activities there as his helicopter landed at the southern tip of Manhattan, and he has been taking a close look at the recovery and rescue efforts underway there in the vicinity of the World Trade Center. But we're just beginning to get a sense of, you know, the enormity. In fact, none of us, you've been talking about this all day long, Aaron in New York and my colleagues, just beginning to get a sense of the enormity of the devastation there in New York City. While we're looking at this, we want to have joining us someone who has been very involved at the Pentagon. Formerly, she was the Deputy Chief of Army Intelligence. She is retired Army General Claudia Kennedy. And General Kennedy, I'm going to pose to you the question that I halfway posed to our correspondent Mike Boettcher a minute ago. If we're getting so much information so quickly now about these suspected terrorists, why didn't we have it before?
Judy, I think that part of the answer lies in the way we've been looking at the terrorist problem. Is it a criminal issue or is it a military threat? And when you handle it as a criminal issue, then what we do is we take a look at it through the FBI, we gather evidence, we try to build an airtight case for court. But when you look at it as a military threat, you look at it for early warning of impending attack, and you try to destroy it before it comes at you.
You're saying the threshold is lower. Is that it?
Well, the threshold is lower for action if you handle it as a military threat. But what I'm saying here is that some time ago, I think we went in one direction, and that is to look at it as a criminal issue. We wanted to make sure we could bring these people to justice through the court system. And I think what's happened is the world has changed, and our approach probably at this point needs to be reviewed and say, do we still want to try to handle this primarily as a matter of law enforcement, or is it now really a military threat that the military needs to deal with?
Well, just as an example, in the last few days, we've learned that that the whereabouts of Osama bin Laden, the United States has been looking at that for a number of years. There have been several instances in recent years where people had identified, authorities had identified his whereabouts, but nothing was done. There was a report yesterday in the Associated Press at the end of the Clinton administration. They had a lot of information, but they chose not to take military action. What would it take to change that approach, I guess is my question.
Well, my thought is, like a lot of Americans today, that what happened on the 11th of September has altered our viewpoint about what terrorism is, how devastating it can be, and it is probably the beginning of some thoughtful discussion about what it is we need to do in response to terrorism. I would say that we have got some superb people in the national security policy area and in operations, and we need to go ahead and take a hard look at this. And I am sure that the President and his team of advisors is taking a very hard look at this even now.
And you believe we're up to the job?
I absolutely know we are.
All right, retired Army General Claudia Kennedy, formerly Deputy Chief of Army Intelligence. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Judy.
I appreciate it. And now back to Aaron in New York as we see these pictures of the recovery effort.
It's a New York Fire Department tent in the foreground there, and somewhere in the background we suspect the President is, and we're certain we'll get better pictures of this when the pool is allowed to get its pictures out. It's a very small pool with the President. Quickly, we mentioned a minute ago that there was some effort to work through the PATH tunnel, the commuter train tunnel from New Jersey to the World Trade Center, in hopes that there were people still alive in the tunnel. Officials now say that is off. There is nothing to salvage. Correspondent Jeff Flock has been working in the Midwest the last couple of days. He was in Wisconsin yesterday. He's in Dubuque, Iowa today, taking the pulse of the country from that vantage point, and he joins us now. Jeff.
Indeed, Aaron, our cross-country tour continues. This is it's a window and door factory, Eagle Windows and Doors. Perhaps you've heard of them. This is one of the places, one of the countless places around the U.S. today that have been marking this day with moments of silence and other observances. And Darren, you were saying you don't want the President's job right now as we were watching him tour.
I couldn't imagine the feelings and emotions that the President has right now. I am so much with him in spirit and in faith. I really hope the best for him.
You folks are a long way away here in Iowa, but you feel very much attached and connected to what's been going on. How is that?
I don't think there's anybody around the country that doesn't somehow know somebody who knows somebody or have a direct relative who was in the area at the time to be affected by it.
We're talking about the reserve call-up. I know you have reservists that work here with you. That's coming. Do you have fear about what's coming down the road now, the next step that this nation takes?
I think there's fear, but there's also just a sense of something's going to be done this time. You know, it's not going to just be washed away. We're going to have to take care of it this time.
This is tape of the President meeting some New York firefighters, New York police officers, some of the workers. This is tape we got back just a minute ago. Jeff will allow your conversations to go on while our viewers also watch the President as he works his way through this group of rescue workers. Look at that face, how tired that young man looks.
His tour today. Do you feel good about how the President has reacted to this so far?
I think he's reacted very positive, and I think that the whole U.S. is behind him, along with underlying nations and larger nations overseas. I think they're all supporting his actions.
As we watch the President in New York talking to the people that are firsthand having contact with this, a rescue effort, what is his next step in your view? What should his next step be?
Just keep visible, keep assuring us that things are going to be okay. He's doing everything that is possible. Just be himself. Right now, he hasn't gone, like in a bunker and hidden. He's been out there right there, and he wants to be with us.
How do you rate him so far?
I think he's doing a very good job. I really liked his speech the other night to the country, as well as, just the support of the prayer vigils and that sort of thing, being support of that, and coming down to New York, which I haven't seen yet. But
we're watching it now on the air.
Right, but being visible to the people.
You said it's a tough job. Nobody wants it in a time like this. Is he the right man for this job?
Oh, I think so, very much so. He's, I think, done as good a job as he could do over the past 8 months, considering what he's had to deal with. And I think that he'll come through shining just the way every president of the United States does.
The nation coming together. Aaron, the latest from Dubuque and our cross-country tour will continue, and we'll continue watching.
Jeff, thanks. Thank you very much. We continue to look at tape of the president. We see, and this is tape, we see New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani just off the president's shoulder there. This is tape that the pool shot just a few moments ago. You know, it gets a little difficult here identifying rubble, to be honest, but I do believe that's an area that we have been able to see as he moves, giving a thumbs up to some of the rescue workers. Again, that's Governor Pataki, the New York governor, off to the president's on the left side of your screen. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and obviously an official with New York's bravest, New York City Fire Department. Certainly no one would quarrel with that this week, would they? That they are New York's bravest. Some 200 firefighters still missing in the rubble. This is, again, tape shot by a very small pool of reporters that have been allowed to travel with the president today. Some of that has to do with security. A lot of it has to do with the fact that the president was very insistent that his visit be, at worst, minimally disruptive. Any presidential visit anywhere is disruptive. Richard Roth is down on the ground. Richard, come on in.
Yes, Aaron, work is going on right very near the president. You can see torches, sparks as what's left of the pedestrian bridge to the American Express corporate building is being brought down. They've been working on it for the last few days. It's one of the structures that's still been left up. One can't help noting that at this time in Wall Street, for the thousands of people in the World Trade Towers, this would be a very joyous part of the week. The stock market would have just been closed. It was Friday afternoon, and usually Wall Street in this area, World Trade Center, has been often called a ghost town on weekends, though more people have been moving down here of late, and as we've noted over and over, it is now a different type of ghost town. You have these giant buildings hulking over the president and his entourage in lower Manhattan, and they're just dark, no power. Some are structurally weakened, their fate unknown. And Friday afternoon in New York, not the way it used to be.
No, it's certainly not. Just helping identify some of the other people there. We see New York Senator Charles Schumer facing the camera, basically. And off to the left there was Joe Albaugh, the FEMA director, a longtime friend of President Bush's, and he named him to run the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Again, this is tape shot by the pool. Is Elizabeth Cohen available here or not?
Yeah. Okay.
Elizabeth, have you seen any activity? Is the president going to make his way to the Armory?
Unfortunately, Aaron, I have no idea.
Okay. Okay. Elizabeth has been, we see Senator Clinton, Senator Hillary Clinton, getting a kiss on the cheek from Mayor Giuliani there. They were almost ran against one another. Kelly Wallace, will the president make his way to the Armory?
Well, Aaron, we don't know, again, because the White House keeping everything under wraps a little bit, but we do know that he is expected to go to another location after this one. So we don't know what that location will be, but we do expect him to go somewhere else after spending some time with firefighters and police officers. And I just wanted to bring up something I learned earlier this afternoon that I don't think has been reported just yet. You see the president there alongside Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton. I was speaking to former President Bill Clinton's spokeswoman earlier today. Of course, we know that the former president, along with Senator Clinton, attending the National Prayer Service in Washington, D.C. And to show you how this really hits home, apparently, according to the spokeswoman, Chelsea Clinton was 12 blocks away at the time of Tuesday's attack, and that she apparently has a friend who was working in one of the towers, one of the Trade Center buildings, and that she and her friend joined countless other New Yorkers racing away from the downtown area shortly after 9 o'clock in the morning. And apparently, according to the former president's spokeswoman, you know, the President Clinton, hearing about this, obviously concerned, but he was a father first and foremost. He was concerned about getting in touch with daughter Chelsea. He couldn't get in touch with her for a while, and he was most gratified when he was finally able to talk with her. And then, of course, we know that the former president was in Australia, made his way back to New York, and that he and Chelsea decided as New Yorkers, according to the spokeswoman, they wanted to go down to the area and talk to New Yorkers and try and do everything they could to comfort those people grieving. I thought that was rather extraordinary. Again, it shows you how this really hits home.
That's remarkable. It's remarkable that it happened, and it's frankly, I think, somewhat remarkable that we hadn't heard it until this point, given how much is out there. Charlie Rangel, congressman from Harlem with the president, and then just in front of Mr. Rangel, Jerry Nadler, also a congressman from the Upper West Side of, I believe that's right, the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It's, as you would expect, it's all very cordial. These are not political moments. New York City is a very democratic town. And voted heavily Democratic in the election, as did the state, but this is not a political moment, and the entire delegation is certainly welcomed with the president today.
And Aaron, a very Democratic town and a Democratic state, but with a Republican mayor and a Republican governor.
Yes, indeed. It is a Republican mayor, and think back all those what seems like a lifetime ago in many ways to Tuesday. Tuesday was election day. Mayor Giuliani is ending his term. Term limits make it impossible for him to run again, and so it was election day to begin the process of choosing his successor. That election was canceled, and I saw this morning it's now been rescheduled, and I can't pull out the date from my brain here, but I know it's in a couple of weeks, I think, to see who will replace him. A couple of Republicans in the race, but at this point, I think it would seem more likely, without predicting any outcome or suggesting I'm doing that, that Mayor Giuliani will give up office to a Democrat. The mayor, as I said earlier, has generally been given, I think, very, very high marks for his handling of this crisis. He has been, as he often is, very visible out there when things go bad or things go well in the city. It doesn't get much worse than this, and he has been tireless out there. We expect in another few seconds or so to get another one of the pool reports from David Gregory. David is the pool correspondent who is traveling with the president today, and he will be telling all of the other reporters and us what he has seen.
This is David Gregory with the president in Lower Manhattan, who continues to survey the damage and what they're calling ground zero. We are within sight of where the Twin Towers stood. The president has been working a rope line surrounded by throngs of policemen, search and rescue crews, firemen, many of them getting on the bulldozers that they had been using to clear the debris, to take a picture, to wave at the president. We understand now that the president is actually going to stand on some of the rubble, grab a bullhorn, and make a statement. Some of these men have been chanting USA, USA, and don't let them get away with any of this. The cheering you're hearing is the president now with a bullhorn in his hand as he is standing aboard some rubble, his arm around a fireman with soot on his face. You can hear the chant. Listen to this. The president about to speak now. Listen in.
I want you all to know you can't go any louder. I want you all to know that America today is on bended knee in prayer for the people that lives lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn, that make the stand with the good people of New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens. I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people for making the nation proud. And may God bless America.
You can hear the chants that continue as the president climbs down off the rubble, grabbing a small American flag and waving it in the air. This crowd here clearly loving it. It's an amazing scene, and as the pictures ultimately get fed back, everyone will be able to see what we are seeing now, a completely electric crowd of people determined to overcome this as the president and the throng of workers are surrounded by complete destruction. At one point, as you heard, some of the workers who were about maybe 50 yards away from the president said, "We can't hear you." The president beckoned back, "I can hear you." And he said, quote, "The people who knocked down these buildings are going to hear all of us." That's the latest with the president as he tours the destruction in Lower Manhattan. I'm David Gregory.
Well, that is about as memorable a scene. I don't make predictions out here, but I'll make this one. I think you probably just saw what's going to be the front page picture in your morning paper tomorrow, the president with a bullhorn or an American flag in his hand, or both, talking to that group of rescue workers. I can't wait to see now the pictures, the lower level pictures. Again, this is tape of the pool of the president at the scene with members of the congressional delegation and New York City officials as well. These are familiar faces now to many of you, and should be, given how much focus has been on the city, this small area, really, a relatively small area of New York City, but how important it is to the city, how symbolic it is about the country. Wall Street, which will open again on Monday at 9:30 after being closed since Tuesday morning, the longest such closure ever. We expect the president to, well, before I do that, if Kelly Wallace up on the roof is still able to hear me. Kelly, I hope you were able to see that in your monitor. I know what that monitor is like up there. Have you ever seen anything like that before?
I have never seen anything like it. As I watched and listened with you, I was just thinking, what an extraordinary moment. There, the president, as you noted, holding a bullhorn, and the chanting, USA, USA, don't let him get away with it. You know, Aaron, we've been reporting that many people hope the president coming here would be sort of a morale booster for these firefighters and these search and rescue teams. Clearly, it appears that that is exactly what happened. It probably, though, Aaron, was a bit of a morale booster for this president, who is obviously facing the most difficult challenge of his only 9-month-old presidency, and that is, of course, balancing an absolute tragedy, trying to comfort the nation, as well as focusing on the investigation and trying to make the difficult decisions about next steps, military options, working with the international community, in his words, to whip out terrorism. So this likely to be a very memorable experience for the president. And Aaron, as we've all been reporting, one of really the most incredible stories here, and certainly one of the toughest is the stories of all those firefighters and police officers who were going into those buildings as all the people working in those buildings were coming down. I know I was on Tuesday not too far from the buildings talking to people who got out, and many people saying that they remember coming down the stairs and firefighters, many very young firefighters going up, and people would cheer, and of course many people very, very upset because many of those same firefighters are now some of the missing. And the president even talking about that in his speech earlier at the prayer service. Aaron, you heard that when he said, talking about all the names that we're learning, and he said they are the names of rescuers, the ones whom death found running up the stairs and into the fires to help others. And obviously many of those firefighters and rescue workers out there certainly concerned about their colleagues and comrades. So obviously a very important moment for those firefighters and rescue workers. Obviously an important moment for the president too. Aaron?
Yeah. I was thinking about the president's morale as you were. Presidents, as you and Judy both know, you've covered them, live in a kind of bubble, and it must have been good for him. Judy?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I read I think it was a New York Times this morning, someone who saw those firefighters going up the stairs at the Trade Center as he was coming down, and thinking later it was a ladder to heaven. That phrase has stuck in my mind. And just, again, thinking about the people, the president getting a boost, in a way, if you will, from meeting with these people. I don't think we can underestimate how important it is to those people on the ground working so hard to see the President of the United States coming in their midst, if only for a few minutes or an hour or half an hour, whatever it is, to shake their hands, to congratulate them, just to do a thumbs up. It must be just an extraordinary lift, provide an extraordinary lift for them to have him there.
Well, meeting a president under any circumstance is not routine. And meeting a president or seeing the president in this circumstance must be something else. It must be something. And goodness knows, these men and women down there have been working long and difficult, and today very uncomfortable days. And any morale boost they can get, much appreciated. Richard Roth has been down there as this group moves through. Richard?
Yes, Aaron. Normally I'm at the United Nations. I guess I'm struck by the fact that here we are again in a year ending in 01, and a Bush in the White House, and the talk, the rhetoric, the language from the National Prayer Service in Washington, and some of the rallying around the flag that we and you saw just now. Certainly very similar to the Persian Gulf War and his father's conflict, when President Bush says this conflict was begun on the times and terms of others and will end, in a way, at an hour of our choosing. He's certainly setting the table for some form of military action to come, and certainly the firefighters and the rescue workers who are feverishly clawing through the rubble will back him to the hilt. There's been 10,000 tons of rubble already removed, a lot more still left there, some of which the president was standing on.
The president...
Aaron,
go ahead, Judy. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, listening to Richard, I'm reminded I was talking earlier today at the Cathedral Prayer Service with Franklin Graham, the son of Billy Graham, and he was saying he thinks the American people are ready for what comes next. We were talking about how in the last 50 years, nothing has really brought the nation together and made people prepared to make what will be some sort of sacrifice in the days, weeks, and months to come. But this is different.
Well, yeah, I mean, say what you will about what went on around the Gulf War, and it was important and it mattered. It was, I think, for many people in the country, they felt it was something the country had to do to engage the Iraqis. There was an economic threat and somewhat of a political threat, I suppose. But this has been a smack in the side of the head of the country, and that's wholly different, it seems to me, in the way people are reacting to it. This is, I mean, I was on the street yesterday. I thought people, you know, I've taken this personally. This is like personal business now. That's a very different feeling to me, as I see it, from the one when the president's father was trying to marshal forces against Iraq.
I think we feel violated as a nation. You know, people talk about feeling violated if they've been mugged or if their house has been broken into or something on a small scale. Of course, it's important to you if it happens to you, but I think our country feels and has been violated, and everyone does take it personally.
And when you hear the reporting of Jeff Flock in Dubuque and in Wisconsin yesterday, other correspondents in other parts of the country, you become aware that it's not just those of us here in New York or in Washington who have this sense of being violated. This is something, this wasn't an attack on New York and Washington. This is an attack on the United States, on institutions of the United States. And I think people have, in fact, taken it quite personally. If you continue to look at the bulldozers working the area, the president, it is not, I'll confess here, not clear to me whether he has moved on. We expect him to go to one more location, perhaps to meet with some of those he has now met with some of the rescue workers, perhaps to meet with some of those sad and desperate people who are seeking their loved ones. We have at various times visited the Armory in New York, which has been set up to deal with the friends and family of the missing. Just a bit ago, the president holding the bullhorn in the center of the picture and addressing the rescue workers, firemen from all over the area, not just New York City, but from all over the area. At one point, they said, "We can't hear you," and he said, "I can hear you." And they were chanting, "USA, USA." There are hundreds, of course, hundreds of workers down there, and in that area, obviously everything came to a stop for a while. It's just a remarkable, even as grainy, this was shot, I suspect, from quite a distance, as grainy as that is, and we'll get a much clearer picture, and you will see still pictures very soon of this too. As grainy as it is still quite remarkable. It's something
Aaron,
to see. Yeah.
I was watching this, and you know, we're talking about how much this means to the rescue crews and the people involved in this recovery. I had a phone call, a couple of phone calls Wednesday night from people in New York saying, "Where is the president? We know, you know, a lot of us didn't vote for him, but we need his presence here." And it's almost as if the White House was listening, because it was Wednesday, or Thursday rather, yesterday, that the White House announced the president would go.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think there's your morning picture right there. The president waving an small American flag in the center of that group of people. What a shot that will be.
Yeah. This is grainy, we should explain, because the light is poor in there. I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, it is almost 5 o'clock here on a very dreary day in New York. As we were saying, it is possible the president will meet with some of the people whose loved ones are missing. Elizabeth Cohen has been at the Armory talking to those people for the last couple of days. It is a difficult and sad place, Elizabeth.
It is a dreary day in New York. It is an especially dreary day here on the corner of 26th and Lexington, where families come in. They are ushered into the Armory to give details about their missing loved ones. They're asked everything: their hair color, their eye color, 7 pages worth of details, and then they are shown 2 lists. One is a list of people who are still in the hospital, and one is a list of people who have been found deceased. But people here on the street corner, despite the dreariness, still have hope. We're going to talk to one of those people right now. Ricky Fortini is looking for his friend Bruce Gary, who is a fireman and was one of the first on the scene called to the World Trade Center. Who saw him last?
One of the members at the firehouse has seen him last, and that was pretty much the end of it. He's still missing. He has 3 children at home that are anxiously waiting for his return, and the hope doesn't stop.
What do you hope will happen when you walk around, you show this picture? I'm sure you're hanging up posters.
Well, hopefully he might be in a medical center. He could be in various different areas that, you know, maybe another member saw, another department member has seen. There's just so many things that can happen.
Tell me about him. We can look at the picture. We can see what he looks like on the outside. Tell me about him on the inside.
He's a great loving dad, has 3 fantastic kids. He's a single father, and he did whatever he could for his kids.
Now you, sir, when you heard about the explosions, you were telling me your first instinct. What was your first instinct?
Our friend and myself, our first instinct was to get to ground zero, which we did about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. We were really the only, I guess, civilians you could say that were there on site, assisting the fire department, any type of staff that was there, whatever we could do.
Were you able to do anything to dig through rubble at all?
Sure. We were moving debris. We were helping the firemen carry hoses. and a various amount of tasks.
Now you still, if you turn, you can see that you still have dust here. You were back there today.
That's a lot of the insulation that was laying all over the ground still and being blown up by the wind. Although the rain has succumbed that, that was most of the dust that was there.
Thank you. Thank you. Aaron, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of stories like this. People who not only are looking for their loved ones, but are trying to help out everyone in this situation at the same time. It would be impossible for me to describe every little story that I've heard of people helping. For example, yesterday there was a vice president of a technology firm who came down here, set up a scanner at the restaurant that I'm standing in front of, and people just came in and he scanned their photos so that they could put them on websites. A girl, she must have been 12 years old, was walking around and offering people peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that she had made, offering journalists, offering people who were looking for family members. Another woman, she went to a hardware store and said they need masks, not the hospital kind, but the real gas mask kind downtown. Can you give me some? They just gave them to her for free, and she ran them down there. There are so many stories like this during this dreary day here in New York. Aaron?
Elizabeth, I think I said to you yesterday at some point that in watching your work down there, listening to the people, one realizes that tragedy is a great equalizer, that in that mix of people there are the families of investment bankers and window washers. You talked to one yesterday, maintenance people, firemen and women. Tragedy knows no distinction in that way. It just affects people. And I think it's one of the things that makes it all so difficult right now. Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm sorry. Martin Savage has been down on the ground, if you will, for this long day, and he joins us now. Martin, I hope you can hear me. I know we're having a little problem.
I can. And I wanted to pass along two things to you, Aaron. First of all, I was contacted even down here at Ground Zero by the Navy, saying that the New York area will have another visitation by a military vessel. This time it is going to be the Navy hospital ship, the U.S. Comfort. It will be passing underneath the Verrazano Bridge around 6 p.m. this evening, about an hour from now. And then about an hour later at 7 o'clock it will be tying up. This is a huge hospital ship that will be offering any aid, any logistical help, anything that it can do and provide to this area if it is needed. The unique thing about this is the fact that this is usually a ship you see in far distant shores. Now it is a military ship tying up here, and not because it's coming back to its home berth. As far as the speech that was given on site there impromptu by the President of the United States, through the benefit of radio here and other audio, some of the rescuers were able to hear that. I had to tell you, when we talked to the rescuers this morning, early this morning, and it was dark and it was gloomy and it was rainy and it was cold, the morale had really been sapped out of a lot of them. And then yet when those words were heard, as you heard the reaction out there at the site, a jolt of electricity went through them. And they have been renewed in two ways, inspired by the words of the President, inspired by the fact that the sun has come out, and now motivated probably twice as hard as they felt this morning to go back to the job that they want to do, to find someone alive and bring them out and return them to their families. Aaron?
Thank you. Rather than us sitting around talking about what the President had to say, I wonder if we can just go back and re-rack the tape. And for people, a lot of people, I suspect, in the East are just getting home from work anyway. The President, just to update you, is in Lower Manhattan now. He has been touring, if that's the right word, observing, looking at the site. And there was a moment not very long ago where the President grabbed a bullhorn in one hand and began to talk to the rescue workers who are down on the ground. It is a little hard to hear in parts, but it is absolutely worth taking a look at and listen to. If you guys have the tape, we can do it.
As we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens, I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of it soon. everybody who's here. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for making the nation proud. And may God bless America.
That was the president just a bit ago. Our senior analyst, Jeff Greenfield, is here. Judy, jump in whenever you wish to. There's no question here, Jeff. Just look at it. What did you see? And
I saw an interesting twist. We thought the president was coming up to boost the morale of the people working.
Work the other
I
way.
think the people were boosting the president's morale. I think he got a tremendous amount of strength and energy from the fact that these guys doing possibly as bad a job, or as worse a job, rather, as horrible a job as any American could ever have been asked to do. We're cheering him on. We're saying, we're with you. It's one of those moments where the kind of political give and take that we're so used to and 4 days ago was dominating the headlines, totally swept away by the magnitude of this. And we're going to be seeing a lot of this all over the country.
It was... Go ahead, Judy.
I was just going to say, I think we're seeing just an extraordinary rallying on the part of the American people that we really can't even begin to know the dimensions of. I keep thinking back to what Billy Graham said at the prayer service here in Washington today. He said they were trying to divide the country, and instead they've done just the opposite. I think he called it a backlash. He said they've united us instead, and he talked about the choice that we have to let this destruction implode on us and disintegrate, but instead our choice is to make us stronger, and that's exactly what it's done, and I think you saw that today with the president.
It's not one of those things you can put a number on, but here are these numbers. Walmart says it sold over 300,000 American flags just Tuesday and Wednesday. Add another 200,000 American flags that Kmart sold. A couple of huge retailers, a lot of small retailers, I suppose, were selling flags too. It is just one of those signs of how people have taken this all.
You know what I'm even encouraged by, and this may sound weird, I'm encouraged by the fact that they haven't completely put politics aside. The Democrats wanted the resolution of support rewritten, not to give the president a blank check. And I almost think it's like when a loved one is very sick and then they start snapping a little, you say, okay, I know they're okay because they're feeling good enough to even have those arguments. Politics is so in our blood that even at this moment, you have people saying, all right, but we still have to remember, we're the Congress, you're the president, we have to give you our support. And I, in fact, take that as a point of...
The dead, or the families, whatever, and my wife called me and I turned the television on and just went into shock.
When was the last time you were able to speak with your daughter?
On Monday night.
And what did you talk about?
And she spoke to my wife and she said, I just had a bad dream that Daddy died. I don't know if that's a premonition of her own death.
Were you able to talk with her that night too?
No, I was asleep and my wife didn't want to wake me.
We see, of course, that your family or someone has sent in this picture of her for anybody who does have information about Bridget. Are you still hopeful that she'll be found, that perhaps maybe she was injured and is at one of the hospitals and you haven't been able to make contact yet?
Her sister, Yvette, who, the two of them, I've never seen two sisters so close. They're best friends. She has been in the streets with Bridget's husband, Michael Esposito, every day from about 11 in the morning to 11 at night, going to all the hospitals, walking around. Yvette has been carrying a picture of Bridget. She has been interviewed all over. And we have a son who is living in Atlanta, and we're all trying to do whatever we can. I've not gone to New York because I have some bad legs. I can't walk very far. And my daughter Yvette said, Dad, there's nothing you can do here because you can't drive around. You have to walk all day, and you can't do it. So I'm waiting for any slight words. So if it is closure, then I'll go.
Well, we understand you're doing your part today, sir, by talking with us here on CNN, by sending the message and sending your daughter's story across the country and around the world. And I realize this is such a difficult time for you and your family. I want to thank you for taking time out to talk with us and draw attention to Bridget's picture and her story. And certainly, we wish you the best of luck. And
I
send our
heard there are
thoughts and
about
prayers.
1,700 people in hospitals in Jersey. I don't know, but Yvette has different parts, like hair of Bridget's for DNA or whatever. I don't know.
Well, we will hold out hope for you, sir, and your family, that Bridget is one of those who is in the hospital. And once again, we do send our best. That's Maurice Thomas, father of Bridget Thomas Esposito, one of the many, many missing people at the World Trade Center. We want to encourage you, too, if you have a missing loved ones, please send your photos. We'll post them for you on CNN.com. The email address to send them along and the information is very simple, missing@CNN.com. And if you need more information, just log on to CNN.com, onto our website, click on missing photos, and all the directions are right there for you to send along the photos and the information. We really, really are trying to help. Aaron, up to you.
Thank you. I just want to say one thing briefly here. These are very difficult things to hear. This is, you stand here with people whose hearts are breaking, and there's a very fine line here, and we are very aware of it. But it's important, I think, not only to help, to get information out on people, but it is also important to remind you and all of us who do this that these are not numbers. These are people who have kids and moms and girlfriends and the whole thing. They're not famous people. They're not going to appear on the front page of any paper, but they are real people, and it's important to keep that in mind in all of this. Down on the streets, the recovery effort continues. On this sunny Saturday in New York, Martin Savage has been on the streets near Ground Zero for the last 3 or 4 days. Marty, come on in.
Aaron, we've been talking to people as they come and go, talking to people who were involved in the rescue operation. Robert Perry is one of those people. He is what is known professionally as a pile driver. I guess more generally you could call him a construction worker. And he has been working on the building and the debris field today. Tell us what you've been doing down there, Robert.
We've been cutting a lot of the large steel sections out of the way to allow the demolition contractors to remove the smaller debris, so that hopefully as they search through it, if there's any survivors and or bodies, that they can access them.
Now, this is not steel girders as they used to be. This is steel that's been twisted and torn.
It's like it's never been. It's dangerous because there's a lot of stress on it, because of its position, because of the way it was driven down by the floors on top of it, and it has to be handled correctly with rigging so that when we do cut it away, it doesn't rip out or fan out or come back into the crane or the hoisting apparatus or hurt other people, which, you know, we really don't need at this point.
Do they tell you specifically where to cut?
Yes, there's supervisors there and structural engineers that are making sure that too big of pieces aren't taken at one time, that pieces that might swing unruly if they're not cut into small enough pieces aren't removed prior to the sequence that they need to be removed.
Well, let me ask you this, since you've been down there and you know far better than most of us. When we talk about the issue of hope and the possibility of survival, what do you think the chances are?
Oh, there's definitely good possibilities. I've been told by workers who've actually been in the subterranean portion that there's a lot of nooks and crannies and bigger areas that somebody could possibly hold up in. Plus, there's a lot of snack shops with water, food. You know, it's conceivable that somebody could be alive under there for a couple of weeks if they just have the patience and the hardness to stick out the trauma.
You mentioned that you had heard some of those who had gone down there had seen some areas literally untouched.
I overheard a couple of the rescue personnel saying that they've been in areas of the sub-basement where in the mall area that there's a lot of activity as far as shops, all of the water. I think some of the water is even still running. So,
what are they using to try to investigate these areas? I know people go down there if they can, but what if the area is too small? What else do they use?
Well, they use like cameras mounted on extension poles, telescopic poles, They use listening devices, which is hard to use because of the surrounding collateral noise. But they have like those fiber optic cameras that they're using and so forth. I saw some of the crews that are using those. They've got quite a bit of every kind of piece of equipment, you know, that they could possibly use is there.
Have you heard of people hearing noises, hearing sounds, indications?
I've only what you've also heard, but I've never heard specifically from any one person. I overheard a couple of firemen talking that they think they might have heard someone further up on the scrap pile that you know, I was away from.
Today was the first day you went to work. First
Yes.
time you've been down there.
Yes.
And you walk up face to face. What did you think?
It looks just like a war zone. It looks just like the footage you see of Germany after bombing. It's indescribable. There's a quiet that it's hard to describe. You think it'd be a lot more noise, but people are in a somber mood as it is. And it just looks devastating. The smoke, a lot of it is also, it's not smoke. It's steam, because they're pouring a lot of water onto the areas where we're cutting, because as the sparks fall, it ignites insulation, curtains, drapes, I can imagine, any type of flammable. So we have people spotting for the fires also. You know, it's a slow process. It's going to take a long time.
How about morale?
Well, a lot of these firemen that you see down there, you see it in their faces. They've lost blocks of men, whole companies in some cases. The police, 25 regular policemen, 25, 30 Port Authority policemen, and plus all of the operating engineers who ran the systems of the buildings, electricians that have been there since the place opened. When companies move in and out, they have to remodel, they have to reconfigure partitions. Carpenters we lost there, members of my own union. It's just a real, you know, everybody's lost somebody.
You were telling me about a special occasion you were planning for at that very location.
Yes, my sister had told me a few weeks ago, her and my brother-in-law were planning on coming down here to the city to do some sightseeing and window shopping and so forth. And I offered to take them after they had their trip to Windows on the World. So I had made reservations for October 6th, my sister's birthday, for us at 7 o'clock. And as it turns out now,
just in case you don't know, Windows on the World is the restaurant that was located
yes,
at the top
of the 105th and 106th floor.
I know you have to leave now.
Yeah,
what are you going to do?
I think I'm just going to walk north for a while and just see people and take some comfort in that. You know, it's good to be out around people and something to see something like that.
Robert Perry, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Aaron, he is just one of countless thousands of people that are involved in the effort now. An effort that, as you hear, is still very much filled with hope. Aaron?
Well, if they have hope, then we do too. We'll share it with them. There are almost 5,000, at least 5,000 almost missing still down in that obscene mess that was once the World Trade Center, and we wish nothing but good fortune to those people who are working so hard on this beautiful Saturday afternoon in New York City in September. Thank you, Marty. It was I think it was when we were talking to Marty yesterday, he talked at one point about how if they think they hear a noise, a ping, someone banging against something, it just goes absolutely silent there. And everybody stops what they're doing and they try and locate the sound, because that sound might mean somebody is alive down there trying to let somebody know that they are still alive. New Yorkers have come out, and really people around the country have come out in extraordinary numbers to offer help to the people on the scene, to the missing, the families of the missing and the like. Bill Hemmer is at, I think it's the Javits Center, where it's the big convention center here in New York, where the volunteer effort is being coordinated. Bill joins us now. Bill, good afternoon to you.
Yeah, Aaron, I will tell you, you know what's remarkable? We've been in this area, about a city block area, for the past 8 hours. I don't think we've gone 5 minutes for the past 8 hours where someone does not come up to us and say, you know, we need to get the word out on this or on that for what we need here. And the list right now, it continues to grow. Desperately, they're saying they need respirators, especially the ones with the replaceable canisters, in order for the workers to continue their work down there without having to change their masks too often. They're also saying hard hats with lights, especially working at nighttime, welding equipment and welding gloves, the long ones that come up your arm, They're saying work boots and goggles are in desperate need as well. Now, the Javits Convention Center, as you mentioned, is where we are. We're on 11th Avenue between 34th and 35th. If there's somebody out there or some company, and believe me, there have been many today and also throughout the week, if you want to contribute, they're saying you can bring it right here to the convention center. That will expedite it in the best way, the quickest way down to the site further south from here. All other items, they're saying, in terms of food and clothing and water, they're saying hang on for a little bit. Maybe they can take more of that a couple days from now, but in the meantime, they have plenty of that at this point. Non-perishable is being taken out to Shea Stadium here in New York and Giant Stadium across the river in New Jersey. Just to bring up another point here, just about a couple minutes ago, somebody came up and said, if anyone has a wireless internet connection, we need it at this point, and they need it here from Javits. Boxes and bins also to help carry things and sort things throughout this entire process. That's on the supply side. Now for the volunteer side, we saw better than 2,000 volunteers line up early this morning, some as early as 1 o'clock in the morning. We were here about 5:30 and saw hundreds and hundreds of people trying to get on a bus, trying to get on top of a flatbed truck to take them down to the site and help and contribute there. We were told about 2 hours ago, no volunteers are needed at this time. They say they have plenty of help where they are right now. In fact, I don't know if we have the videotape or not, but our photographer, Rich Brooks, just walked that line several hours ago. And when Rich walked, he walked and walked and walked because the line literally came down the street corner here, took her right on 34th, straight toward the Hudson River, and kept on going. That is the amazing turnout we have seen thus far here. So the volunteers at this point are saying, they're being told, thank you, check back in a couple of days, and it's possible they could hit you right at that point. Aaron, it's an incredible scene on the streets of New York. We'll watch it for you here down at the Javits Center.
Thank you. And just to reiterate that it is not so much people they need now as things that they need now. Very practical things from, I think they're respirators. They look like gas masks with those little side filters on them, to welding gloves and the rest. So if you want to be helpful, please do. Bill, thank you. Listen, I was driving in today on the West Side Highway. It's the first time I've done that since it happened, and it was the strangest drive-in I can ever imagine. Elizabeth Cohen is at the Armory where the missing have gathered, as many of you know, and she joins us again. Elizabeth?
Aaron, here at the Armory, some 3,000 families have come to register information about the people who they're missing, and also to look at two lists. One list is a list of people who have been found in the hospital. Another is a list of people who have been found deceased. I am here with someone who is looking for his brother. Anthony Gardner is looking for his brother Harvey, and also for Harvey's friend Joyce. And Anthony, tell me, when was the last time anyone heard from your brother?
My brother Harvey worked for a company called General Telecom on the 83rd floor of Building 1. My brother Mark miraculously managed to get in touch with him after the initial crash. And Harvey said that they were being told conflicting things. They weren't sure what to do. And that was the last we've heard. We know that he's with his great friend and co-worker. We know they're together, and there were 13 people in that company at that point. And we haven't heard anything from any of them as of yet, but we remain hopeful that they will come home to us, that they are out there. And I'll come down here every day and check the lists until we find their names on there.
You told me that someone from a church gave you this flower, and it has a psalm on it that you said expressed how you feel. Could you read that for us?
Of course. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. And I think that sentiment is felt all over New York, all over our country. We will only become stronger from this, and we will just persevere from here. And my hope is that, they find, our loved ones, and they bring them home to us, and we rebuild those towers, and we show terrorists and terrorism that they will never succeed and they could never beat us.
Tell me about the necklace you're wearing.
I'm wearing my brother's necklace. Wednesday, he's going to kill me when he comes home. Wednesday, I went to his apartment, and I took this as his favorite necklace, and I'm wearing it until he comes home. And I'm going to give it back to him when he walks back in the door.
Thank you.
I believe that he will come home. We have a tremendous amount of hope.
And
that's what we want all other families to have right now. Just keep the faith that they will come home to us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aaron, hope is a word that you hear over and over again. It's Saturday. The explosion was Tuesday. The hope is still there. Aaron?
I would call it more than hope. He seems certain. I'm kind of liking that. Thank you, Elizabeth, very much. You probably now know the name Reverend Michael Judge. He was the fire department chaplain who died on Tuesday. At his funeral, former President Bill Clinton was there, and he talked briefly to reporters, and he said, among other things, he urged his fellow citizens to be confident, to trust President Bush to make the right decision. We suspect the former president is understanding better than at any time in the last 8 months or so the unique and sometimes difficult role a former president has in American life. CNN correspondent Brian Nelson was at the funeral as well. Brian.
Hello, Aaron. I'm standing in front of Fire Station 24, which is just across the street from where Reverend Judge was memorialized this morning in funeral services. And after the services were over, we spoke with the former president, and he was speaking about the courage of the New York firefighters since the tragic events on Tuesday. And then I asked him about what his feelings were, knowing the fact that this funeral here today and two others in the city of two other firefighters are probably the first leading edge of hundreds and perhaps thousands of funerals across the city resulting from the World Trade Center disaster. Here's what he had to say.
I think that we'll have to take the appropriate action. Thousands of innocent people died. And I think that
21 on radio.
You know, that's a decision for the president to make, but I said before, I'll say again, I think that we should trust the people there to find the truth and take the right action. And the rest of us should worry about taking care of the victims and their families, rebuilding the city and the country, and continuing to make America a force for tolerance and decency.
Now, the former president also went on to say, he made a point of saying that the tragedy of the World Trade Center should not be taken as reflective of Arabs. He says there's a huge Arab and Muslim population in this country, and perhaps referring to the fears of some sort of backlash, he said we should, as a nation, this nation, should stand up for decency and tolerance as a people, but he said we should be absolutely intolerant of the kind of violence witnessed here on Tuesday. That violence, of course, took thousands of lives, and as I said earlier, it took the life of Father Michael Judge. He was the chaplain for 10 years of the New York Fire Department, an amazing man by all accounts, 68 years old. He befriended everyone in the fire department, took all comers with their personal problems, marital, alcohol problems, children in the hospital. He took on all comers. He was known far and wide in the city, especially by the homeless of New York. When they saw him coming, they knew that he would sidle up to them and hand them $1 out of his pocket, a stash of which he kept just for that, at that moment. He was also known abroad too. This man was well known in the city and elsewhere, and it was a really moving ceremony today. Let's listen in. Clinton addressed the congregation during the funeral services today and said that she and her husband had invited the Reverend Judge to the White House for a prayer service breakfast, and she was amazed at how this man just lit up everything inside. He was a man who was just brilliant and full of life, and that was the thrust of her remarks today. Mr. Clinton himself said that Reverend Judge's entire life was a rebuke to the kind of violence that we've witnessed at the World Trade Center on Tuesday. And now, Reverend Michael Judge has become the first New York City Fire Department chaplain to die in the line of duty. Aaron?
Aaron, thanks. The motto of the fire department, New York's bravest. And as we reflect back on the events of Tuesday, nobody will argue that. Not now, and I suspect not ever again. There are still almost 300 firefighters, I think I got the number right, right about 300, who are still missing in the rubble among the 5,000 missing there. In Israel today, right now, in fact, at Rabin Square, there is a solidarity rally going on. The Israelis, of course, a unique relationship with the United States, and perhaps few, if any, other country on the planet understands the devastation that terrorism can cause. They've lived with it for a long time. So it is a marriage in that regard of note. You've got a friend indeed. The Israelis, and a little bit of news coming out of Israel too, we might mention, there was a plan for a meeting between Shimon Peres and Yasser Arafat to take place tomorrow. That now has been canceled, and we'll try and figure out why, though I do believe that Prime Minister Sharon yesterday said that he did not think the time now was right for any sort of negotiation between the Palestinians and the Israelis in the aftermath of Tuesday's terrorist attack. That meeting with Peres and Arafat has been canceled, and these pictures live from Rabin Square in Tel Aviv. Here around the country this Saturday.
I'm Anita Rajpal at the CNN Center. We break away from our sister network CNN USA to update you on some international reaction to this week's terrorist attacks on the United States. Pakistan has voted unanimously to help the international community fight terrorism. The vote came at the end of a rare joint session of the Pakistani Cabinet and National Security Council, and it comes in the face of threats of holy war from Afghanistan against those helping the U.S. with a military response. Tom Intier has the story.
Decision time for the Pakistan government of President Pervez Musharraf.
We will consider all the pros and cons.
He opened the 4-hour joint meeting of the Cabinet and the Security Council with a call for a moment of silence to honor those who died in America. We were then excused as they discussed the U.S. call for help to punish those deemed responsible for the acts of terrorism in the U.S. Pakistan has already offered assistance in the battle against terrorism, but it's still not clear how this government will assist the United States if a military operation is required. Following the meeting, Pakistan's foreign minister preferred to talk about the United Nations, not the United States.
Consistent with Pakistan's record of support for the decisions of the Security Council, it was decided that the government will discharge its responsibilities under international law.
The UN Security Council has passed a resolution to condemn the acts of terrorism. The United States has pressed Pakistan to help, asking for permission to use Pakistani airspace if military action is required.
We are in the process of discussion with regard to details of the specific proposals. I can only indicate to you a general policy of support.
While sources in Washington and Islamabad are reporting full compliance with the U.S. requests, the foreign minister revealed no specific proposals or agreement. But in a sign of the political tightrope being walked by Pakistan's military leadership, even general support is enough to anger many here.
Pakistan is going to be in the front. America is putting them up front. The problems are all going to be in Pakistan.
There will be violence here. That is the reality.
Pakistan is playing it close to the vest, revealing little of what it plans to do to help the United States. The only clear point made by the government is that it will not participate in any military operation outside its borders. Tom Intier, CNN, Islamabad, Pakistan.
Well, the Russian government is inching closer to supporting a military response to the attacks on the United States, but the director of Moscow's Federal Security Bureau tells CNN any attempt to track down Osama bin Laden should be well thought out.
Россия не старалась когда-либо его уничтожить.
I agree that Osama bin Laden is suspect number one. Russia has never tried to kill him. When we talk about a criminal, we talk about infiltrating his criminal actions and, most importantly, arresting him and turning him over to the courts so he will be punished appropriately. That's what I think should be done. However, we have experience when a suspect offers armed resistance. In order to avoid casualties, it is possible to kill him.
In Lebanon, family members of another suspect say he is missing. Ziad Samir Jarrah is believed to have died when the plane he helped hijack crashed in the U.S. state of Pennsylvania Tuesday. German officials say he attended a Hamburg technical school together with two of the other hijackers named by U.S. authorities. The family tells CNN that Ziad Samir Jarrah spent some time in Afghanistan 18 months ago. Fears are growing of a backlash against Muslim communities around the world. There have already been a number of isolated incidents across the United States and Europe, including a gun being fired at the exterior of one mosque in South London. As Liz George reports, leaders are concerned that talk of recrimination could inflame the situation.
A busy street known for its many Muslim shops, restaurants and cafes. And here as elsewhere, the horrific events in the US are condemned by local residents.
This is something that most Muslims feel disgusted about. In Quran it's written down that if you kill one person, it's the same if you would kill the whole mankind. And if you save a life, it's the same if you would save the whole mankind. So this is absolutely haram, that means forbidden, to kill somebody.
But even as prayers go out to those people involved in the terrorist attacks, community leaders are becoming concerned about the risk of an ethnic backlash. It was one of the early issues raised during Britain's emergency session of Parliament on Friday.
And would he further assure this House that it would be quite wrong for the British Muslims to be tarred with the same brush following this dreadful act of terrorism? Thank you.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his words, and I think that he will speak on behalf of many Muslims in this country when he says that they share the shock and horror at this outrage.
Angry scenes have erupted in France. Here in London, a mosque across town from this one was shot at late Friday, and a few isolated incidents of stone throwing have been reported.
A school that my sisters go to, an Islamic school that my sisters go to, have had to be shut down because of what's happening in America. And, you know, why should we suffer? We've done nothing to the Americans. Why should we suffer for what they've done?
There have been people throwing stones and bricks at mosques and things like that. And even my wife also, I mean, when she walks out, people look at her as if she has exploded the bomb or something like that. I mean, this is not a nice thing. And if we start behaving in the same way, and if you start doing it the same way, then what's the difference between those terrorists and the civilized world?
Here, though, the atmosphere was sober. Leaders are worried that even discussion of anger aimed at them will only inflame tensions further. As these Londoners struggle to get on with their usual weekend chores, their expressions suggest thoughts are elsewhere in the world. Liz George, CNN, London.
And for more reaction from around the world, we go to World Report's Octavia Nasser. Octavia.
Thanks, Monita. The news of the terrorist attacks against the U.S. landmarks instantly spread into the four corners of the world. Emotions continue to run high, and people the world over are still in disbelief and shock at what befell their fellow humans. Lithuania has a
born from the United States after the terrorist attacks. Adamkus was also the only state president who happened to be in Washington when the terror struck. He was whisked away to the secure shelter and watched the events unfolding.
I personally felt, that this was not the only Americans, but all of us individually were hurt.
And same was the opinion in the streets of Vilnius, Lithuanian capital, half a world away.
I feel terrible because my sister was there and she almost died, and my friends are there, and I was really shocked.
1/4 of the entire nation lives in the United States of Lithuanian heritage, and we actually felt naturally about them like we felt about entire American nation. So the outpour and such a spontaneous outpour of people, reacting and about the losses in the United States, coming to the United States Embassy, expressing their sorrow and sympathy, placing the flowers. I believe this was a normal reaction of the people, how they feel.
Emotion has spread through the whole nation, reaching the smallest villages.
Terrible, holy terrible, oh Jesus, oh my God, God save us from such incidents. What if the nuclear station exploded? That would be a catastrophe, the end of the world.
While the Lithuanian officials have calmed the people, the security of the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe was stepped up. Back in Washington, the president was keeping in touch with the situation in Lithuania and had to cancel the meeting with President Bush on the day of the terrorist attacks.
I even don't have not the slightest hope or idea, that we should continue and that
You have the more serious issues.
Yet this further strengthened Lithuania's resolve to share the responsibility of the free world. As Lithuania observed a moment of silence, the president addressed the nation, stressing that as a candidate to join NATO, this country will commit all resources requested to defend democracy. As the American people mourn, so do the Lithuanians. And as the United States prepare to defend itself, the Lithuanian people pledge to be together with the free world, not only in words, but also in concrete action. Vykintas Pugačiauskas, Lithuanian television, for the CNN World Report.
Reaction is pouring in from all over the world, most of it condemnation of the act of terrorism that hit the United States. And while some countries held prayers in honor of the lives lost, others are concerned about their nationals who had the ill fate of being in or around the targets. Norman Hermant of Canada CBC spoke with families who are missing loved ones. Here's what they had to say.
For Cindy and Dave Barkway, their trip to New York this week was a rare getaway. Dave on business, Cindy tagging along. 2-year-old Jamie would stay behind in capable hands.
She thought my mom could look after Jamie and she'd get 2 days in New York City and they could just spend some time by themselves.
On Tuesday morning, the day they were to fly back to Toronto, Dave went to a meeting at the brokerage firm Cantor Fitzgerald on the 103rd floor of the World Trade Center.
I immediately called my mother, and at this point she had found out that he was in the World Trade Center. So she said, you know, we've got a bit of a problem here. Dave's was in the World Trade Center this morning. At that point, I think I just collapsed. Or I couldn't really talk at the time.
Back in Toronto, it didn't take long for word to spread to Jeff Eby that his old friend was in the World Trade Center. Immediately after the plane hit, Barkway had contacted co-workers back home.
He first emailed them, from what I understand, that he's okay, he's trying to get out, but we're okay up here. And then he emailed back a short time thereafter and saying, we're not okay, get help up here right away.
Eby was facing the reality that another friend from Toronto might also be trapped. Ralph Gerhardt dreamed about making it big in New York. He did, becoming a top broker at Cantor Fitzgerald.
When I think of Ralph, I think of his laugh. He had this big bellowing laugh, and he could ride anything through.
On Tuesday, Ralph Gerhardt was at his desk on the 103rd floor. Just after the impact, he reached for his phone.
He had called his mother and said, there's been a bomb in the building. I'm just calling to let you know I'm okay, but I've got to get out of here. I've got to go now.
Like so many others, family members are now in New York, searching for Gerhardt and Barkway.
Maybe he was evacuated or got out before it collapsed.
Canadian families still trying to find loved ones are flooding a Department of Foreign Affairs hotline, hoping for any news. There are also websites where the names of survivors are being posted. Jamie's father may be gone.
Jamie has some of his expressions and we want him to be able to keep them. We're afraid that without him around, he'll stop doing his silly faces that Dave does, but...
To anyone who ever considers doing something like this, I mean, you consider the families like us and like thousands out there and the many children that will grow up without parents.
Norman Hermant, CBC News, Toronto.
And now for more international reaction, we go back to Monita.
Octavia, thanks a lot for that. Well, the U.S. Defense Department has released a video from inside the damaged Pentagon. We now take a look. What we can see here once again, and this is the damaged portion of the Pentagon, which was the newly refurbished part of the Pentagon, according to the facility manager. Significantly more than $100 million in damage was done to the military headquarters. Army engineers are saying that what they're doing now is they're replacing column by column, one by one, to ensure that the rest of the building stability is intact. Most of the damage, once again, was done to the newly refurbished quarters of the Pentagon. The Pentagon says 189 people died in the attack, 125 Pentagon personnel and 64 passengers on American Airlines flight number 77. Now, the FBI has confirmed that there is now a name for the investigation of Tuesday's terrorist attacks, Pent Bomb. It comes from a combination of Pen for Pentagon and 2 T's for the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. For more on the rescue efforts and for information on emergency services, log on to cnn.com/missing. There you'll find a list of known victims as well as audio and video links, including an emotional interview with a man whose father is among those missing in New York City. That's all at cnn.com/missing. I'm Juanita Rajpal at the CNN Center. Stay tuned next for Q&A with Jim Clancy. He'll speak with U.S. General Wesley Clark about the terrorist attacks and what the world's response should be. The phone lines are open now. To join the discussion, call 404-525-6888. That's 404-525-6888. Once again, I'm Juanita Rajpal. Thank you for joining us. Q&A is next.
Underneath our tears is the strong determination of America to win this war. And we will win it.
A war unlike any other. How will it be fought? And how will it be won? On today's Q&A.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jim Clancy. The events of the last week are unprecedented in modern history. What happens next is unknown territory for the United States and for the international community.
Entrepreneurs, shopkeepers, moms and dads, and they need to be treated with respect. In our anger and emotion, our fellow Americans must treat each other with respect. Women who cover their heads in this country must feel comfortable going outside their homes. Moms who wear cover must not be intimidated in America. That's not the America I know. That's not the America I value. I've been told that some fear to leave. Some don't want to go shopping for their families. Some don't want to go about their ordinary daily routines, because by wearing cover, they're afraid they'll be intimidated. That should not and that will not stand in America. Those who feel like they can intimidate our fellow citizens to take out their anger don't represent the best of America. They represent the worst of humankind. And they should be ashamed of that kind of behavior. Now, this is a great country. It's a great country because we share the same values of respect and dignity and human worth. And it is my honor to be meeting with leaders who feel just the same way I do. They're outraged, they're sad, they love America just as much as I do. And I want to thank you all for giving me a chance to come by, and may God bless us all.
President Bush speaking at the Islamic Center here in Washington just a short time ago today, underlining 2 messages: that Arab Americans should not be targeted just because of the source of last Tuesday's terrorism, but also underlining how important it is to go after the people who were responsible for what happened last week. White House correspondent John King joins us now. John, the president seems to be coming back again and again to these themes that he's been stressing in the last couple of days.
That's right, Judy. Almost by the hour, we see the president dealing with a different challenge. Many challenges confront him in the wake of these terrorist attacks. There you saw the president urging Americans to show tolerance, to not tolerate in any way an anti-Arab backlash. That in the last hour. In this hour, the president sitting down with his senior economic advisors here at the White House to discuss the activity on Wall Street today, also to discuss just how far the administration is willing to go as Congress considers a multi-billion-dollar bailout of the airline industry. So the economy, the president's focus at this hour. Earlier Earlier in the day, his focus was on the military planning. Mr. Bush went across the Potomac River to the Pentagon, some symbolism there. He wanted to show that military planning continues at the Pentagon despite the devastation and the mourning there. Mr. Bush shaking hands with troops here, members of the armed services. Just before this session here in the halls of the Pentagon, he met in the conference room of the Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. That briefing was about call-up of the reservists, 35,000 members of the reserves and the National Guard about to be called up, almost all of them, if not all of them, for duty here in the United States. But in that session, Mr. Bush took some questions from reporters, talking very tough. He identified Mr. bin Laden, Osama bin Laden, as the prime suspect, and when asked if he wanted Mr. bin Laden dead or alive, very tough words from the president.
Osama bin Laden is just one person. He is representative of networks of people who absolutely have made their cause to defeat the freedoms that we understand, and we will not allow him to do so.
Mr. Do you want bin Laden dead?
I want him held. I want justice. And there's an old poster out west, as I recall, that said "Wanted, dead or alive."
An echo of that tough talk just a bit after the president spoke there at the Pentagon at the White House briefing. The press secretary, Ari Fleischer, was asked about just what the president meant, and perhaps did this mean the president was going to waive that policy that dates back to the Ford administration, forbidding the United States government from sponsoring assassinations. Mr. Fleischer said no, that the policy on assassinations, against assassinations, remain in effect, but he pointedly noted, Judy, that there are exceptions.
This is a legal matter, and I'm sure the lawyers will have more to say if they want to, but that's the answer, Ron. It does not, the executive order does not limit the United States' ability to act in self-defense.
And is going after bin Laden an act of self-defense?
I'm not going to define all the steps that may or may not be taken.
As the military planning continues, the diplomatic effort as well, U.S. officials telling CNN they are receiving intelligence information on the bin Laden organization from Russia, from Pakistan, from India as well. The president's diplomatic outreach continues. We're told in the past 24 hours, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have promised to sever ties with the Taliban ruling government in Afghanistan. And as the president tries to build international support for military action and for what he calls a sustained war on terrorism, the White House announcing today the French President Jacques Chirac will be here tomorrow for consultations with the president, followed by the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Tony Blair. He will be here in Washington on Thursday. Judy?
All right, John King, at the White House, movement on many diplomatic fronts. And speaking of that, now let's get the latest on the evident ultimatum presented to Afghanistan and whether Osama bin Laden may lose his safe harbor there. TNN's Nick Robertson joins us by video phone from Kandahar, Afghanistan. Nick, if you would, bring us up to date on that ultimatum, what it consists of.
Well, that ultimatum essentially telling the Taliban leadership that they need to hand over Osama bin Laden or face the consequences, delivered by two senior Pakistani diplomats who have very strong connections with the Taliban already. One of them a former ambassador to Afghanistan from Pakistan, the other the head of Pakistan's intelligence services, both diplomats who have had many dealings with the Taliban in the past and certainly will know many of the leaders, and in particular will know the foreign minister who they met with today. They also met with the supreme spiritual leader, Mullah Muhammad Omar, telling him essentially that he has a very short time to make a decision and that it is his responsibility to do that quickly. Now, the Taliban characterized these meetings saying that they'd heard it all before, but they were going to give it due consideration, and it was following these meetings that Mullah Omar announced a meeting of 600 clerics in Kabul tomorrow. The focus will shift 300 miles north of here to the capital, Kabul. Those clerics will meet. We understand the Pakistani diplomats will also be in Kabul tomorrow. That's Tuesday, monitoring events. The clerics could reach a decision fairly quickly. It's not clear if they will at this stage, but certainly any decision they reach would go back to Mullah Omar again, the supreme spiritual leader of the Taliban. And if he so chooses, he could choose to listen to it, but he could also choose to overrule it if he decided. Judy?
Nick, wouldn't it represent a major shift in policy if Afghanistan were to agree to tell Osama bin Laden and his people to leave after their posture all along until now has been that he's not responsible for these sorts of things?
Oh, it would be a complete 180-degree turn. It would be unprecedented, in fact, in Taliban thinking. Generally, when the Taliban in recent times has come up against the world, essentially also on Osama bin Laden facing United Nations sanctions 2 years ago, they've said no. When the Taliban were wanting to blow up the ancient historic Buddhas here carved into some cliff faces, the international community said, no, don't do it. The Taliban went ahead and did it. The Taliban have generally stood by everything that they've decided to do in the past. And certainly the public position that they're putting forward at this time is that Osama bin Laden is an honored guest. He's a guest that they're putting up in Afghanistan because he sought refuge here in 1996 and because he'd helped them during the jihad years trying to fight off the Soviet occupation in the 1980s. There's no reason to believe that they'll change their opinion at this stage, certainly from the public statements we've been hearing. So if they were to reverse that decision, that would be a major reversal, not only of this decision, but of the Taliban turning decision under pressure from the international community on any major issue. They just have not done this type of thing in the past.
All right, Nick Robertson joining us from Kandahar in Afghanistan. And now to Joey in Atlanta.
Judy, as the United States considers its military options, no nation perhaps knows the pitfalls of mounting a military operation in Afghanistan better than does Russia. The former Soviet Union tried without success to subdue Afghanistan for most of a decade. And one veteran of those battles warns that the region and its fighters pose unique challenges. CNN's Jill Doherty reports from Moscow.
Here, more than 20 years ago, in the treacherous mountains of Afghanistan, Leo Karolkov fought a war like no other. His assignment was to train Soviet Special Operations Commandos, similar to America's Delta Force.
Modern weapons, rockets, laser-guided missiles, they're useless against these mountains.
Leo was there when Soviet troops moved into Afghanistan, and he was there when they left, after a decade of fighting and 15,000 dead.
I feel sorry for the people who are going to be thrown into those deserted mountainous regions where the enemy knows every single rock, every cave. No maps, no computer training can prepare you for it.
As for finding Osama bin Laden, Karolkov says there are a million places he could hide, just like the Mujahideen he and his men tried to find during their war. Diversionary tactics, terror, suicide attacks were the way the enemy achieved his aims. Leo says he saw Afghan fighters shot to ribbons, still clutching their weapons and firing until their last breath. Many of them, he says, used drugs before launching operations. But they were, he says, the most effective force he has ever seen, honed on 20 years of continual war. They were also well supplied with Stinger missiles provided by the Soviet Union's Cold War foe, the United States. Russia expected to stay a few months in Afghanistan. It ended up fighting for 10 years. It was a searing lesson, Leo says, that scarred Russia just as Vietnam tore at the soul of America. These fighters can bring any country, he says, even a superpower, be it Russia, the United States, or Europe, to the brink of catastrophe. Jill Doherty, CNN, Moscow.
We will update our viewers on the latest on the investigation into Tuesday's attacks in just a moment, including new information from the Justice Department and the FBI. Stay with us.
Not so long ago, I'd have been considered an incurable romantic.
This woman is trying to prevent a fragile environment being destroyed by the search for oil and gas. She wants to preserve an area of outstanding natural beauty for future generations and protect the local culture from the shock of the new.
We believe it's possible to provide the energy the planet needs without ignoring the needs of the planet.
Despite this, she's not at war with the oil company. She is the oil company.